Greetings, adventure. Welcome to the D20 Academy podcast. I'm Shiloh.
And I'm Gabriel, and this week is episode 59, World Building Magic. Alright, this week is our perhaps final episode of our world building series here. This one we get to focus entirely on magic and how it affects your world. This might be a part 1, part 2, but we'll see how that goes based on how long we run here.
We seem to go on tangents, and this world building series has gone on way longer than we thought it would. We have to keep splitting up all the sections. So the subtopics today we're going to talk about, we're first going to go over Sanderson's laws, then narrative/system, and then talk about culture within magic. Hey, Instagram, at D20_Academy. Follow us on Instagram. We're going to give you updates on what we're doing here. Cool stuff there. You can also get on Discord by contacting us on Instagram or whatever. Our Discord's really cool. We're going to have conversations about stuff, and you can also find the documents to the class rebuilds that we're doing. Check out last week's episode. No, 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks ago? 2 weeks ago?
I don't know. I've lost
2 weeks
track
ago.
of time entirely.
2 weeks ago. I'm pretty sure it's 2 weeks ago. We did a class rebuild. We're going to do that every month for each of the classes. A lot of fun. If you want to, listen, what am I saying? Read along, listen along, understand what we're talking about in those. Go get the document on the Discord. We also have a YouTube channel if you'd like to listen to podcast episodes on YouTube instead. Okay, let's get into the episode.
Alright, drum roll, please. That was actually my magical unseen servant that did that drum roll there.
Yep.
Speaking of magic.
Dude, by the end, like, when we get to like the 100th episode, just every sentence is a segue. To like everything will just be a segue. Hey.
Speaking of periods, there's a period right here. And this is a new sentence.
Speaking of new sentences, yeah, so we're doing magic, you guys. Maybe this one will do better than the other world building episodes. They don't get a lot of attraction. I don't care. I like world building. No, but magic is. We think when you think magic, you're like, wow, this is gonna be a really long, epic episode, probably split into like 5 parts. That's what I assumed, because I feel like magic is just so integral to like fantasy and stuff. But really, it might just be just the one episode. I don't know if it's actually going to be that long.
Very well might, because, as with a lot of things that seem very complicated, often the best way of dealing with them is finding a way to simplify it so that you understand and know what you can do, and everyone else can understand it as well.
Yeah. I mean, just magic and magic systems and stuff can like be so complex. But like talking about it, like talking about magic in like world building in general or whatever, there's actually not like a lot of like, like little nitty gritty details. It's mostly like conceptual things, which is fun. So let's get into, speaking of conceptual things, let's talk about Sanderson's laws.
So, Brandon Sanderson,
our Lord and Savior.
Great author. Apparently,
author.
I just woke up.
Author.
Author sounds like a name for like a sorcerer.
Author.
or like a title.
The great author Brandon. Love his work. Huge fan. Huge fan of Brandon Sanderson and his work, and especially his magic systems. He is a epic fantasy author, and he is kind of known for his magic systems, making them very detailed and hard magic systems. So let's talk about that real quick. Gabe, what is a hard magic system compared to a soft?
A hard magic system has rules, explicitly like describing and detailing what magic does, what magic can do, how you use magic, so that the reader can try and understand, have like a deeper understanding of how magic works by laying out all the details and laws.
Right.
and rules.
And a soft is the opposite of that, where the
Yeah.
reader does not fully understand or comprehend the magic, and it's more of like a wondrous, mystical, mysterious thing.
Yeah.
Rather
Where
than like
things aren't
science.
necessarily all detailed or
Yeah. So
bold.
it's like hard magic is like a science essentially, because what magic is in your world is just like new laws, right? Like new like natural laws essentially.
Yeah.
Um, and so hard magic is clearly defining to the reader, and typically the protagonist as well, because the reader is viewing the world and everything through the viewpoint character, the protagonist, and so typically, hard magic means that you understand how the magic works, like it's a science. You understand the rules of it, and then soft magic is like you don't really understand it. It's more of a wondrous, mysterious thing.
And magic systems can be anywhere in between as well.
Yes, yes,
It's not.
yes.
It's like a gradient,
Yeah. So the classic, we're going to be talking about these a lot. We're going to be talking about a couple examples a lot probably in this episode.
Mm-hmm.
The classic soft magic system, most widely known, is Lord of the Rings, Middle Earth soft magic. Whereas, as the readers, we are seeing Middle Earth, viewing the world through the hobbits, whether it be Bilbo or Frodo or whatever, right? They're the everyman. They're the ones that we're experiencing the world through. And just like the hobbits, we're thrust into this magical big world, right? Middle Earth, with knights and kingdoms and wizards. And magic is something powerful and beyond us. Because what is Sauron? What can he do? What does Sauron, what can he do? What are his powers? We don't really know. What can Gandalf, really do? He's a wizard, but, what does that mean? We don't know. Because the magic is, beyond us. It's not told explicitly to us. And so it evokes more of, a wondrous, mystical feeling. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then, a good example of a hard magic system.
I mean, yeah. There's Brandon Sanderson's books, but, not everyone has read Brandon Sanderson like everyone understands Lord of the Rings. I'm going to say, and I'm going to bring this example up a lot, that the most, commonplace, probably hard magic system I can think of right now, off the top of my head, is Avatar: The Last Airbender. Right? I don't know if there's another more popular example.
I guess that'd be the... I guess so?
Yeah. Well, if we think of another example that, is pretty common, then, yeah. We'll let you know.
Okay. Well, let's roll with that.
Off the top of my head, Avatar is the most regular mainstream series or whatever that has a hard magic system. Okay, so there's soft magic and hard magic. Neither is better than the other. You do whatever you use the one that suits your story best and the tale you are trying to tell. Anyway, Brandon Sanderson makes his stories and his worlds typically have very hard magic. His magic systems are pretty intense and detailed. And he loves that. Something he loves. His fans love it. And so because he's not the creator of magic systems, obviously. He didn't invent the concept of magic or whatever in fantasy. But he has kind of spearheaded hard magic systems in popular culture and stuff. So he came up with his own laws for magic systems. Gabe, what is Sanderson's first law?
The first law is an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic. And this is really important here.
Yeah.
Really important and applicable to no matter what story you're building with magic in it. Just like with a tool, you have to establish it beforehand before it's used,
Right.
If not, then okay, what is this? Where did this come from?
Yeah, Deus Ex Machina, right? Nobody likes Deus Ex Machina. Stupid.
Or they just don't understand what's happening.
Yeah, or they just don't understand what's happening. But yeah, so this is really good because this is not favoring. This rule is not saying hard magic is better or soft magic is better. It's saying depending on where you fall on that spectrum, where your world and your story falls on that spectrum, that magic system spectrum, your ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well your audience understands that magic. So if you want to have a character solve a problem using their magical powers, then the readers have to understand, like, it has to have been established beforehand that magic can do that, right? Otherwise, it feels cheated and weird. And fantasy can often fall into this this kind of trope of like magic is like crazy and it's like powerful, and then like the protagonist like surges with power and then does a thing, and you're like, okay, but like that didn't really mean anything, you know what I mean? Because I don't know what that is. I don't know what they're doing. What are they channeling? What are they casting a spell? I don't understand. It happens a lot. But, you know, this is like right back to Tolkien, right? We don't understand the magic very well. We don't understand what Gandalf can do. Thankfully, Gandalf doesn't really ever like solve conflict with magic that we don't understand. Same with Brandon Sanderson's books with Hard Magic System. He establishes a very detailed magic system with rules that we understand, and he solves conflict in his story with his magic, but he's using things that we already understand, right? He's not breaking his own rules that he's established to solve a problem, because then it feels like, you know, that it feels like you cheat your readers and your audience when you do stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. So, just reiterate that again. Explain something before you use it so that people understand.
Yeah, I just thought of another good hard magic system. Full Metal Alchemist. I know a lot of people like fantasy and D&D and stuff, like anime. Full Metal Alchemist is like the perfect example, actually. Because in Full Metal Alchemist, it's the law that they stated like the beginning of every episode or whatever is that equilibrium or whatever. How much you give is how much you receive. So however much you sacrifice, you'll reap an equal amount. Right? I think. I haven't
pretty
really
sure.
watched it a lot. I don't know what time
they have like alchemy rules and stuff.
Yeah. Basically, if you want to use in that world to gain this power, you have to sacrifice some of this. So it's all equal. And that's a great example of a hard magic system. So that when someone gets something really powerful or does something really powerful in that series, and they sacrifice an equal amount of something to get that, it doesn't feel like it was cheated. It doesn't feel like that at all, right? Because they're staying within the laws that they established. And the reader understands how that magic works.
And having a drawback like that where it has a cost is really important and leads us into the second law.
Oh, is that supposed
so
to
the
read
second
it?
law.
Okay, I didn't know if were you handing that to me. Good.
Sanderson's second law is limitations is greater than power. The limitations of a magic system, oh my gosh, are more interesting than its capabilities. What magic can't do is more interesting than what it can do. That sounds really weird at first.
Yeah, but it makes for better stories.
Yes.
Okay. So one thing, okay, like probably like 99% of our audience is people who play tabletop role-playing games like D&D or whatever. All of the things that we're talking about right now are built into the system you're using. There could be a system that's broken and doesn't have rules about magic, but typically all the stuff that we're talking about here is built into the system. So if we're talking about 5th edition D&D, right, as a spellcaster, you have spell slots. You can only have a limited amount of spells. You only can prepare a limited amount of spells. There's already rules set on the magic, right? So 5th edition, technically, is a very hard magic system. Because you, as the audience, as the players, as the GM, as the people experiencing the story, you understand how magic works. If you're this level, you have this many spell slots. So you can only cast that much spells. And you can't do any more than that. It's rules as in literally the rules of the game, right? These are not rules that like an author has established in their own story. These are literally the rules of the game. And of course, if you break these, you break the game, right? You break the experience. If your wizard is 3rd level and they cast a 3rd level spell, they don't have a 3rd level spell slot, so they can't do that. And if they were able to do that, right, that would break the game. Those spells are really powerful. So all the stuff we're talking about here is kind of is usually built into the system, unless it's like a very open narrative system or whatever.
Exactly. And another good thing about limitations is that it increases like the conflict in story moments.
Mm-hmm.
When you add these limitations to your magic system, like, oh, this can only be used this many times a day, or it can be used but has a cost, or it can be used but only in this specific way, it adds a certain variable of like uncertainty to any sort of conflict. But if there is nothing controlling the power, no limitations, then the answer to every situation is just, oh, magic.
Right. The reason you want more limitations than not on your magic is just because it makes for better stories and makes for better conflict. In Brendan Sanderson's writing class he teaches at BYU, and he puts all his lectures on YouTube for free. It's amazing that he does that. He talks about this rule, and he says that, like, it's interesting in your story if you said, what if a boy could suddenly had the ability to fly. That's interesting, right? But you know what's more interesting? If the boy suddenly gained the ability to fly, but only when his parents were both sleeping. Or only if every time he flew, one of his relatives died. Right? You were constricting the power level of this feat that you just... This magic power. Not magic per se, but a power, right? I mean, in superheroes, right? They have very hard magic systems. They're not magic per se, but in the same sense, right? We know what Spider-Man can do. He can sense when danger's coming. He can climb up walls, and he can shoot webs. And I think that's it. Right? Oh, he's kind of stronger and faster. And that's what we've established that Spider-Man can do. And so then he has to solve the problems with that, right? But he has limitations, right? He can't shoot all the web he wants because there's a certain amount. And he, can't sense all the... And there's, there's, other things, limitations on his powers. Obviously, he has to be conscious to be able to sense the danger or whatever. I actually don't know if that's true. But, even in superheroes or whatever, the more limitations that you put on it, the more interesting the story is, the more the conflict. There's more conflict. Does that make sense?
It's just like when we say that it's best to have a lot of flaws in your character.
Yes, exactly.
It simply just makes for more and more interesting conflict.
Yep. Exactly.
Bada boom.
Okay, third law. Expand on what you have already before you add something new. This is the curse of world builders. Depends on who you are and, your personality or whatever. But if you're a world builder, there's a high chance that because you're ambitious enough to do something like that you just have a gazillion ideas all the time and you're just creating a pretty crazy world and you're just constantly adding things or whatever. That's me. So I add so much stuff to my world. I like to make them very complex. I like to make them very deep. I'm constantly just adding a gazillion things to my world. But just like your world, just like your magic system, it's better to expand on what you have already, right? Better to go long than to go wide. So it's better to take, right? So in your magic system, let's just say that let's just be very simple, that as people, 1 in every 100 kids are born with the ability to fly. Okay? That's the magic system you've set up for your story. That's it. That's the only magic you have. And you delve really deep into that concept about this only 1 in every 100 kids can fly. What exactly are the limitations of that? What does this mean for the story? What does this mean for the world? And you go really down long with that, right? Really deep into it, rather than going fly, and then also every 1 in every 50 kids can see through walls, and just adding a gazillion other things that are all really shallow.
1 in every 23.57 kids can... Yeah.
Exactly. Right? Let's look at Avatar. 4 elements. 4. Right? Mm-hmm. And it's a 3-season show, so that's a lot of time. That's a lot of screen time, right? But they only explore 4. And really, it's just one base magic system. But only 4 elements. that that the audience has to keep track of and remember, and they really dive deep into each one. What are the capabilities really of each of these? What does this mean for the society in which these people can use this magic? Instead of going water, earth, fire, air, spirit, ether, metal, cardboard, and like just adding a bunch. Cardboard bending. Or whatever, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I know making really complex things with this a ton of cool magic options is really fun, really interesting, but as an author, you have to keep in mind that you know your work and your ideas better than the people who are reading it are going to. And they only know what you put down on the page and have to assume other things. So don't put too much work on your plate. Don't have too many things that you don't have the time to detail all of them. And you don't have the time to explain all of them, so that your game doesn't end up, or your book doesn't end up with a bajillion magic options that no one understands.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a billion magic options that aren't thought through.
Yes.
So you haven't thought of the ramifications, or...
And I'm gonna piss off some people here, but a good example of someone who did not do this was J.K. Rowling in Harry Potter. Harry Potter, love it, great. Okay, it's great, great series, loved it, part of my childhood, still love it. Okay, but not just the magic system, but also the world in general is pretty flimsy and shallow. I will say, I know I'm pissing some people off, but in Harry Potter, there's a gazillion spells. And yes, she doesn't mention every single one, thank God, and doesn't confuse the readers too much, but still, we never really dive deep into she didn't just establish a few rules or whatever, she adds a gazillion things. And it is really fun, but if you think about it for a while, it's very shallow. And there's not a lot of depth to it. And so...
Okay. Am I the only one that when I was reading the Half-Blood Prince, and we find the spell that Snape had made? I'm like,
Sectum Sempra.
This is sick. We're gonna make a spell.
Wait, what?
But no. I was like, oh, this is cool. The three are gonna make a spell that helps them or something.
Oh, right. Yeah. Look, but they didn't.
No.
I don't. That was anyway. No,
someone makes the spell. What
we
exactly
do.
the
No,
spell?
we like Harry Potter. We swear. But yeah, no. I mean, there's other than the fact that the world just has a lot of weird holes.
Yeah.
And if you really think about it, the magic too is very flimsy. It is a softer magic system, thankfully, and I think J.K. Rowling obeys the first law quite well. Once again, really all we know about magic is that you have to say the right words and then move your wand in the right formation to cast a spell. And some are easier, and does it take up some energy to do it? It's not really clear, because obviously there are spells that are more powerful than other ones.
Mm-hmm.
How do you not know those ones already? It's soft. It's a soft magic system. We're not super clear on how it all works. But thankfully, I feel like in Harry Potter they don't. I don't even know if it ever happens where they're we're stuck, we're trapped here, how are we gonna get out? We're closed in on all sides by our enemy. Let's just use this spell. And you're like, whoa, I've heard this only once, I don't even know what this does. And they use it and they win. And you're like, what the heck? I don't know what that is, I don't know what that does. I don't think that
that's
really...
one thing that they did well with Harry Potter and the Magic is that they did a pretty decent job of explaining the spells that were important.
Yeah.
That they use constantly.
Exactly. I don't
why
think
they use the
she
same
really...
two spells constantly. I don't know.
Yeah.
But...
yeah, I don't think she ever really broke the first law in that regard. So that's good. But yeah, I think there's a lot of back to this third law. I don't think she expanded super deeply, added a lot of depth to what she already had, and added just a ton of things. I mean, once again,
and part of this third law.
Avatar, yeah.
meaning like expand on what you have. When you have fewer like magic systems to keep in mind and to detail, you can go further in depth, where you can figure out the ramifications of
Yeah.
any said like magic. Like that magic system we were talking about, where kids get the ability to fly when their parents are asleep. Like, okay, now what are the ramifications of that? Like, what do the kids do? Have there been accidents because of that? Have
Yeah.
they like formed like a community because of that? Have this, have that,
And
and you can
also,
figure out like
go
the
ahead.
interconnection between like all the different
Yeah.
magic systems that you're introducing. You know, like, okay, how does this interact with this? How does this benefit this? And it's like making the right piece for the puzzle rather than just making a ton of pieces.
Yeah. Brandon Sanderson, obviously, he came up with this law. A great example is in his Mistborn trilogy. Fantastic books. Amazing. But this was kind of his breakout book. It would made him very, very popular. And is also the thing that like kind of turned him into like the magic system guy. The magic system is pretty detailed and it's a very hard magic system. It's very well fleshed out. You as a reader understand it very clearly. And therefore he's able to solve conflict with it and have battles and stuff with it. And you always understand what's going on because he's established well into your mind how the system works. Anywho, he does this really well. In the first book, so in this whole world, this is not really spoiling a lot, I don't think, but there are 3 different magic systems in this world. And they're not all totally disparate. They all have something to do with metal, but they are 3 different magic systems, right? But he introduced them one at a time. So in the first book, all you know about is this one. The other ones are briefly mentioned or whatever, but he just introduces you this main one, fleshes it out very clearly, goes deep with it. He explores all the avenues with it, and you really understand this magic system. And by the end of the first book, you're like, I got it. It's an amazing magic system, but it's like it's called allomancy. You're like, this is awesome. I get it. In the second book, we still have this magic system that we understand, and then he adds the other one. And then the third book, then he introduces the third one. And he didn't introduce all 3 right at the beginning. He introduced just one, expanded all the way with it till we got familiar with it, and just at the point where we're like, okay, I understand. I get it. I've had enough. He introduces the next one and goes deep with that. And we explore all the avenues of what that could possibly do and how you could possibly solve problems with that. And then the third one. And I think that's a great example. He expanded what he already had. After that was fully fleshed out and expanded and discovered, then he added something new. And it was a really pleasurable experience for the reader as you got more and like you. It's really good. It's really a great feeling as a reader, a fantasy reader, when you like understand the world fully. It's just and you like a nerd of the world. It's just a great feeling, and the fact that he just kept would add one in after you already understand this thing or whatever, I think is a great example of that. Just like in D&D, you don't get all the spells ever at first level. You just get first level spells to choose from. Then when you get more familiar with the game and how spellcasting works in 5th edition, you get a little more complex spells and a little more spells to choose from. Like that.
Brilliant. All right. So what's this little thing at the end here? Sanderson's zeroth law.
Yeah. So he also has a 0th law.
Yeah.
Which is just for fun. It's err on the side of awesome, which I love.
Pretty straightforward.
Yep.
Magic should be awesome. Magic should be interesting and amazing because it's so different from what we have in this world. And people love to see magic in stories because it brings them into this fantasy realm. So, err on the side of being awesome.
Yep. I mean, it's like the rule of cool in tabletop role-playing games, right? As a GM, so if you don't know what the rule of cool is, it's a GMing thing where, like, sometimes you just ignore the rules or whatever, or bend them a bit, or the dice rolls, in favor of a really awesome, cool moment. That's what the rule of cool is that, like, cool is better than rules. I'm not saying that cool is better than rules. That it's a highly contentious topic, and I am not going to name my opinion right now before I get canceled, but that there is a thing called the rule of cool, which you may have heard, which is like when you in D&D or whatever tabletop role-playing game, where like, you know, you're like, you fudge a roll in favor of a really cool moment.
Not that I ever have done that, or not that I ever haven't done that.
Yeah, not gonna say that I have an opinion on this, but that is the same concept. Err on the side of awesome, okay? As long as the awesomeness does not compromise what you've set up and everyone's like, this is just a Deus Ex Machina. If it's awesome for everybody involved, right? Yeah, just have fun with it is what he's saying. Just, when in doubt, do the coolest thing. And I think that's a great rule to just have in life, honestly. That's not true.
Okay.
It's like, when in life, just do the coolest thing, even if it endangers. I'm just kidding. Okay.
All right. Moving on.
So those are Sanderson's laws. They are the most important things to remember while you're making a magic system for your world. Don't ever forget them. Okay.
Moving on, we've got a couple of narrative questions to ask yourself when you're making your magic system and integrating it into a world that are important to think about so that you don't run into any plot holes later down the road, so that you have a greater understanding of how it works. First off being, to what ends and purposes is magic used in your world, you know? Is it something that people use in a mundane fashion, where they use it to, you know, sweep their floors, wash their dishes, and thatch their roof? I don't know, searching for something there for a second. Or is it something that is reserved for special occasions? Something that's reserved for perhaps war? Is it something that's reserved for serious occasions, and it's only available in large proportions in a big cataclysmic event, in a massive war, in this, in that? What ends and purposes does magic have?
Yeah, I mean, that's just, yeah, it's just a good thing just about world building, right? If you come up with a new thing and you add it to your world, like, what does that mean for your world, right? Like, what do people use that for, right? Yeah. But I think you should also ask this question in just regards to your story. If you're creating a magic system for your fantasy book, you know, to what ends and purposes is that in your story? Why is that in your story, right? Mm-hmm. You also want to figure that out. I think it's important to your narrative as well as to your world.
Next is something along the lines of what I was talking about, is who can use it? Who can use magic? Is it something that everyone knows, from the king to the commoner in the street? Is it something that is only taught by, you know, prestigious universities, so only the people who have enough money or who get sponsored can get into it and learn magic? Or is it something that is, you know, passed down through a bloodline or through royalty?
Right.
Or nobility? Who can use magic?
The simple answer, I think, to who can use it magic is druids, clerics, paladins, rangers, wizards, warlocks, and sorcerers. And Eldritch Knights and arcane tricksters. No, but yeah, it's very important for your world. Does everybody have magic? Do just wizards have magic or whatever? Once again, let's look at our poster child for literally everything that has to do with anything. Avatar: The Last Airbender. Who can use the magic system? Benders. Only benders. And actually, this is never explained. I actually don't know how you... Wait, so, like... Are the different nations, like, different, like, ethnicities? And if you're born with that ethnicity, you have the possibility of getting that bending? Or can a firebender be born in the earth-bending nation and they ship them off to the... I actually don't know, now that I think about it. How you actually get your bend. Does literally your nationality, which is a conceptual thing, decide your bending capabilities? I don't know, and frankly, I don't care because it's irrelevant. But only benders, right, in the world of Avatar, which doesn't have a name, by the way, which is weird, can use magic. Not every single person. Only benders, and they're not super rare, right? I think they make up like 25% of the population, so maybe 50. I'm not sure.
But a decent
But that's
amount of the population.
very simple. Just benders can use bending. If we look at something like the Wheel of Time, only women can use magic, because any guy who tries to use magic goes insane. So, twist it in your own way. If it's just wizards or just women or just benders or whatever it is, you want to figure out who actually has access to using magic.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Elves, maybe also it could be like a ancestry thing.
Yeah. All right. Next thing is something we touched on earlier. What limits are there to its power? What limits and consequences are there to using magic? And this is a really important thing to detail, as we were talking about earlier, and you really want to dive deep into it.
Yep. Right. Spell slots. Full Metal Alchemist, equal give and take. All that kind of stuff.
It doesn't have to be super complicated. It can literally be like, oh, a person can use magic once per day, once per 24 hours, or they can only use magic in direct sunlight or in direct moonlight, or something like that. There's so many ways you can limit magic. It just matters and depends on what your story is and what your world is.
And at least for me, I think consequences are even more interesting than just limits. So rather than just saying you have X amount of spell slots per day, that's a limitation. A consequence is you have X amount of spell slots per day, and every time, or maybe even not that, but every time you cast a spell, a little percentage of your soul gets destroyed or whatever, or one of your bones break, or I don't care what the consequence is. You start to go crazier. You start to get filled with more bloodlust every time you use... Right? The One Ring. Boom. What can it do? Turn you invisible. That's super helpful for sneaking past things, right?
Well,
and hiding.
That's not technically what it does, but yeah.
Okay, well, In basic terms, it turns you invisible. However, the more you put it on, the more Sauron can find you, the more corrupted you become, drawn, obsessed by the ring itself, right? Those are consequences. Frodo can put on the ring as much as he wants. There's no limitation to the amount of times he can put on his ring. He can be invisible his whole life if he wants to. But every time he puts it on, Sauron finds him. He becomes more obsessed with the ring. He feels its weight more on his soul, right? Yeah. And a good story makes him put it on, right? Forces him into a situation where he has to put it on and then has to deal with the consequences.
Brilliant. Truly brilliant. Yeah. All right, another important thing about magic is how do you use it? It sounds pretty simple, but you can make this as complicated as you want or simple as you want. How do you use magic? Is it like Harry Potter where you have to know the spell, know the movement of your wand, have your wand, be able to say the word or mentally think the word, and then you can cast the spell? Or is it you have to muster some sort of inner strength or inner power to be able to cast some sort of arcane magic? Or is it I have to have a power source like nature or some life to draw from to cast magic?
Yep.
Do you require a book?
Right.
A book on magic. Or book of magic.
Magic book. I actually have a couple of those in my house. I know how to do pretty good card tricks, side note. But anyway. So in D&D, this is verbal somatic material. Right? Each spell has one of these three tags or one or more of these three tags. And that requires you to either speak an incantation, have a free hand to draw a sigil in the air, whatever, flap it around magically, and then have materials to expend, right? Whether from a component pouch or from a focus, a wand, or a staff. That's how they do it in D&D 5th edition. And let's once again use another great example from the greatest thing ever to exist, Avatar: The Last Airbender. Um, the How do they use magic? Well, probably the thing you think of first is they have to do martial arts, and that's true. You have to move your body in a certain sequence to bend, right? You do some kind of martial arts move to bend your element in that way. But you also need access to that element, right? Earthbenders need to be next to Earth to be able to bend that Earth. And waterbenders need to have water. And firebenders need to have fire nearby or some sort of heat like the sunlight. And only
Which makes
then...
a lot of sense, as
Yeah.
that's what's limiting power in this world as well. It's a good limiter. It makes sense. It's a logical limiter. Sorry.
Okay, you know what? Let's just talk about Avatar and how amazing the magic system is, because I just actually have so many things. I've been waiting to like answer each little parts of it with each question, but I just need to just talk about how amazing this magic system is and how it obeys all the three laws.
Shiro, welcome to the studio today. Hope you're doing well. And first off, got a list of questions here from the viewers. What is that question that you want me to ask you so much about Avatar: The Last Airbender?
Okay, so the thing about going deep instead of going wide, right? So let's look, right, after Last Airbender, 4 elements, you can bend the 4 elements. But instead of adding a gazillion elements, they just have the 4 and they dive deep into each one. They're like, hey, water bending? Well, you know there's water in blood. So therefore, you can also blood bend. You know there's also bits of earth and iron. So you can metal bend. And there is, fire, heat, lightning. You can lightning bend if you're also a firebender. This is expanding on what you already have rather than adding something new, right? That law. Also ties back to the first law, which is your ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the audience understands that magic, right? This is a very minor spoiler, when Katara and Toph are captured, they're put into a cell. And they don't have access, neither of them have access to either of their, they don't have access to earth or water. So neither of them can really bend to get out of this cell. But then, Katara is like, oh my gosh, there's water on us, our sweat. So if we run and we do a lot of physical activity, we'll sweat a lot. I can then bend that sweat water, and I'll water bend it and cut our way out of this cell. That is the creators solving a problem with magic, and it does not feel like a cheat to us or anything, because we understand how waterbending works. You just need water. And so then when Katara cleverly figures out, oh, we can just use sweat, you as the audience is like, that is so satisfying. Wow. You're like, that's the most satisfying thing ever. When they find a creative way of, using their magic system, what they've already established to solve problems, I mean, it's really one of the most satisfying things ever. So, yeah, okay. I'm done. Sorry. Gabe, did you want to... Avatar is just the greatest thing ever, but the magic is also really good.
No problem. I get it. Avatar: The Last Airbender is really interesting for a lot of reasons. And part of it that really interests me is how interconnected bending is with its history and its cultures, and really shows how a magic system can be integrated into a culture, It can be integrated into a history, just like we're going to talk about in this next section here.
Go ahead, hop into it. Segue, man.
Alright. I like talking about history and figuring out how changes that you make to a world affect the history. Alright, what is the history of magic and magicians in your world? This is, again, another thing that you can detail varying amounts. You can detail a little bit, detail it a lot. Depends on the story. But it is good to think about the history of your world and how magic has affected it. If you introduce a magic system that has a spell that can, burrow through mountains of enormous proportions, how has that affected travel, trade, warfare. Now that way is opened up, they can just burrow through the mountain instead of going around it or over it. How does the magic system that allows you to fly affect those things? Are there now battles being fought in the air by, warriors who have the ability to fly? Is there, like, couriers that fly around the city, delivering messages constantly? Do people transport things in the air? There's a lot of things you can think of, and you have to think of how that has affected the world now, how has it affected it in its history, and how's it going to affect it as you go through your story.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry,
I think
I continue going on this for forever if you don't stop.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Another example. Not Avatar this time. Wheel of Time.
Now it's been
this
hard.
Is like, I don't think this is really a spoiler at all. But in Wheel of Time, the magic, it's called the one source or the true source or whatever. And there are two it looks like the yin and the yang. There's two halves, the male source and the female source. Females can access the female source, males can access the male source. Not all females and males, just ones who are born with the ability to do that. But something happened in history where the Dark One, the Sauron character, tainted the male side of the magic, and so whenever a guy tries to use the magic, he goes insane. And so that's something happened in history that has affected the world, how the world is today, where now only females are the magic users, and any male who has access to magic is what's called gentled, which means that the female wizards find them and then take away their ability to use magic because they're too dangerous, because they're going to go crazy and hurt people. Right? So that's a great example of the history of magic and magicians in your world, and you want to figure out that as well. The next thing I want to talk about is how does society view magic? Do they view it positively, negatively? Are like people who use magic like outcasts and like witches, or are they like cool people and like everyone respects them, like Gandalf?
Yeah, this is a good thing to keep in mind. Making a magic system, or even just like making a city that has magic. Think of, does magic give like a certain status? Does magic mean that people are going to look down on those who have magic? Does a show of magic mean like, this person has magic, I know that they're nobility, or I know that they're a learned person, How does society like, view that? What do they know from magic? And yeah, sorry, that one just ended abruptly.
Yeah.
How does society view magic?
Very, 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 very simple. Okay, what's next?
Alright, you already kind of talked about that one.
Yeah, we're gonna talk about that.
Yeah. Is magic regulated anyway? I like this. If so, what governing body? Is there like a city where magic is heavily restricted because it's dangerous, or it's considered dangerous, or it's too demanding and the drawback is too harsh that it's outlawed, Is it outlawed, and then how is that tracked? How is that punished? Is there a a council that searches after people who use magic without license? Is there, and if there is that, then does that council like hunt down your character in your story, or hunt down your players? There are a lot of times where you come into fantasy where you'll come to like a city that has like certain like religious values that they hold that causes them to outlaw magic. They see it as like a perversion of nature or whatever, and that's really interesting. It's a trope, but it's a really good one. It's interesting. And it can provide interesting moments where you come to a place where magic isn't as accepted as it is in other places, and it's regulated, it's controlled, and that can affect the players, can affect your characters and your story.
Yep. I think this is used all the time in any magic school story, whether it's Harry Potter or whatever. There's like a magic school subplot all the time. There's a gazillion of these where the characters are like in magic school or whatever. And there's typically rules, right? Like you can only use magic in class or when there's a teacher around. And like when the kids, and they're like following the mystery or whatever without the adults knowing, and then they have to like, they're using magic to solve these problems and to, get further in this mystery. They're breaking the rules, right? There's like some kind of magic law in the way or in the school or whatever, right? But that's, but also there's like, you can't use magic in this city, or you can't use your magic to try to affect someone else's mind, or, you can't use... Okay, I have a question for you, Gid, that I just thought of.
Okay.
Where would you say the Force falls on the soft to hard magic scale? From Star Wars, the Force.
More towards the soft side?
Okay, why?
It's this literal force that is in everyone, everything. We don't know exactly what it can do. We know some of its powers of being able to cause forced lightning, or to push people away or pull things towards you, to be able to sense things. So yes, it is detailed in some way. It's not like entirely soft magic. We don't really understand the rules of it, and understand like why. Okay, like midichlorians, I guess, if we want to get into that. Sure.
Yeah, I was just going to mention that I would say it's.
But if you're going just off of like the original series and then like the sequels.
No. We have to talk about
the Force. The prequels.
We have to talk about the Force in canon, okay?
All right. Sure. Yes, it does, because of like midichlorians and stuff in the prequels. It is a lot more hard than it is if you're looking at all the rest of the material.
Yeah.
Other than that. Which I don't like.
Yes, okay. Nobody does. I would say, now that I'm thinking about it, I would say it probably lands right in the middle. I think that there are definitely Force powers, that are established, that you understand. Telekinesis, right? You can move things with your mind. You can use the Force to affect other people's minds if they are weak-willed. And if you're bad, you can use it to make lightning. And that's kind of all the powers that are kind of established, right? That are pretty commonly used. Telekinesis is the main one, and then affecting other people's minds, and then lightning if you're a bad person. And I think that's more leaning towards hard, right? There are things that are established, and the characters who can use the Force use those powers that we already understand to do those things. However, the Force is not fully, totally explained, right? There's still some mystical things, and the Force is sometimes used as an explanation for, like, weird magical things that you don't fully understand or whatever. And so that makes
like
it
a force of, like, destiny.
Exactly. Destiny, or, like, in the sequels, which we're not going to talk about our Star Wars opinions in this podcast, it's not what this is for. But in the sequels, Rey and Kylo Ren are, like, having some sort, like, they are connected somehow, and they can, like, talk to each other across long distances. Somehow, right? And that's just explained by using the Force, right? We don't fully understand what that is or what that means, so that's making it more softer. I'm not going to say that I like that or I don't like that. That's not, we're not here for this. But I would say the Force sits like right in the middle, I think. So, once again, you don't have to have a super hard magic system. You don't have to have a super soft. As long as you obey the laws, you can fall anywhere on the scale.
Alright, that's a good take. It's a good take. I agree. I'd completely forgotten about some of the things. Yeah.
Yeah, also,
sorry,
like...
I'm like 2 inches away from jumping into a rant about Star Wars and the Force.
We're not...
Moving on.
We love Star Wars. We have a Star Wars campaign going right now. And even in that campaign, I've used the Force as an explanation for weird magical things that the characters don't understand, right? And that is fine because it's kind of been established as more of a softer thing in Star Wars. But then also, for Force users, in the system that we're using, which is the Fantasy Flight game, like Edge of the Empire system, if you're a Force user, there are obviously rules to using the Force. and ways you can do that, right? And so therefore, boom, right? Harder magic system. Okay.
All right, I've actually got another tangent.
Yeah.
I think it would be really interesting to see if Wizards of the Coast could come to the table and figure out some way to port the simplicity of 5th edition's magic system into a more soft magic system, while still keeping it simple enough to understand and play through.
What do you mean?
I'm just wondering if they could make like a soft magic system with enough rules to be able to play it, but still with like the simplicity and the balance of 5th edition. Sorry, it's just a thought experiment. I just like, wonder what that would be like.
Okay. I think I kind of get what you're saying. Like making it more of like a narrative piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Well, okay, final one. Question. Oh, wait, no, did we do this one?
Yeah, we already talked about the Assassin Society.
Okay. How many magic users exist in your world, and how do they perceive one another? Are they very rare? Are they very common? And what is their outlook on other magic users?
Yeah.
Right?
If they're very rare, do they see themselves as like a brotherhood, a family? Or do they see each other as like a freak of nature? A competitor? You
Right.
know, you can throw a lot of things in there, and depending on how many there are, you can change that. Depending on the world, obviously, you change that. But it's good to understand, because when you introduce a magic system, you're gonna have people who use that magic, and it's interesting when people run into each other. And when they meet, you want to figure out what are their like what's predisposition towards each other.
Right. Like Harry Potter. There's a bunch of wizards and witches in that world, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then like some are like cool and they're like the ministry in Hogwarts, and then some are bad dudes like Death Eaters and stuff, right? I don't really remember. I haven't read or seen the books or seen the movies in a while. I think it's something like that. Are there other factions? I don't really recall. Also, there's squibs, which is like the most bummer thing in the world, which is someone who's born in a wizard family, but they somehow, for some reason, don't have magical powers.
That's just so depressing.
That's the most depressing thought ever. And then there are, I can't think of the politically correct term, so I'm going to get canceled and say mudblood, who are born in muggle families, but they have magical powers, right?
Yeah.
And so they all view each other differently, right?
Mm-hmm. Be based on other things, and not necessarily based on the fact that they have magic, I would say.
Right.
Well, yes, they like, view people who have magic differently than they view people who don't have magic. They view them like they like have more similarities and more things in common. But it's not like, oh, everyone who has magic is a competitor to me, or everyone who has magic is an enemy to me. Nothing like that.
Exactly. Okay, that's all we have to talk about with magic. So we got the laws. Let's go over them again real quick. First law: an author's ability to solve conflict with magic is directly proportional to how well the reader understands said magic.
Mm-hmm. Big one. Second law is limitations greater than power.
I lost it. Third law: expand on what you have already before you add something new.
And zeroth law is err on the side of awesome.
Yeah. Magic is really fun, and it's really cool to put into your world. And definitely, like, if you're a fan of hard magic systems, like Avatar, Fullmetal Alchemist, or Brandon Sanderson's books or whatever, you're going to be tempted, and you're going to want to put hard magic systems in your books, like I am right now. in my stories. I love hard magic systems, and that's a lot of fun building those. And it's also fun, to create like a more mystical, wondrous Narnia, Middle-earth world with a softer magic system. Whatever you like, whatever suits your story. But I think magic is like the primary staple of fantasy. And once again, how we kind of talked about today, when we say magic, it's not always like in fantasy, right? It's not always magic. It could also be superpowers or whatever, right? But yeah, I'm really excited for you guys to start building magic in your world and start constructing your magic systems. I would definitely suggest listening to Brandon Sanderson's lectures on writing science fiction and fantasy. You can find him on YouTube. His BYU lectures, he has a couple episodes on the magic system. And I think to hear it from him is really helpful. But yeah, Gabe, is there anything else you want to say about magics before we go to closing?
As always with all these world building episodes, always ask yourself the one question:
Yes.
How does this affect the rest of my world?
Yep.
You always want to keep that in mind. I want to reiterate that here, as we've done with every single one of these episodes. It's a really important thing to keep in mind. Everything that you do in world building. And secondly, have fun with it. Make some interesting magic systems. Have fun with magic in your world. And write it. Play it. Do it. We need more fantasy and need more people interested in it. People doing that. So please do it. Don't get too distracted by all these things we're laying out here in these episodes that you become too overwhelmed. These are just guidelines and things to help you along the way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we go pretty deep in these episodes, so don't feel like you have to start off your world going super detailed into everything. Definitely. Yeah.
Bada bing, bada boom.
Hey guys, thanks so much for listening. That's it. That's the end of our world building series. Adieu. You served us well. We only have one series going. That means now, which is class rebuild.
Class rebuilds, yeah.
Maybe we'll come up with another one. Because I like the doing like a part of a series and then a regular episode, part of a series, regular episode. That kind of format is fun. So every month you get one of each series and then 2 regular episodes between them. I like that. So maybe we'll come up with a new series or whatever. I totally forgot about that because we just ended world building. But hey guys, check us on Instagram at D20 Academy and our Discord and our YouTube.
We just ended world building.
Sorry?
We just ended world building. We killed it.
We killed it. It's over.
Destroyed it.
Yes. What do we have next week?
I don't know. We've written it down.
Rebuild. Do we not even have an episode?
I don't know. I don't think so. Hey, this is a great idea. Great time to join our Discord and leave a suggestion for us.
Yes. Before we figure out what we're doing next week.
Go over to our Instagram, comment on our posts, message us, get into our Discord. You can say, like, hey, I really want you to talk about X.
Yeah. So look out for that episode next week. And then the week after that, we're going to do the class rebuild on the Bard. So excited for that one. Bard's my favorite class. Bard is the best class objectively. So really, really excited to do that one. But see you next week when we're talking about whatever we're going to talk about. Probably going to be awesome. Go listen to it. Hey, thanks for sticking with us.
Stay safe. Thank you for listening. Play a mystic.
Don't play a mystic. I knew you were going to say.